Tell me about how the company was and is structured, because now that was 7 years ago. So take us behind the curtain. I saw something Sam Altman wrote. He said, we've attempted to set up our structure in a way that aligns our incentives with a good outcome. What does that even mean?
Yeah, so we are a weird looking company.
In what sense?
So we started as a nonprofit because we had this grand mission, but we did not know how to operationalize it. Right? We know that we want to have AGI benefit all of humanity, but what does that mean? What are you supposed to do? And so we started as a research lab. We hired some PhDs, we did some research, we open sourced some code, and our original plan was open source everything, right? You think about how you can have a good impact. Maybe if you just make everything available to anyone that can make any changes they want, then if there's one bad actor, well, you've got 7 billion good actors who can keep them in check. And I think that this plan was a good place to start, but Ilya and I, we were really the ones running the company in the early days, spent a lot of time really thinking about how do you turn this into the kind of impact that we think is possible, into something that really can make a difference in terms of just how beneficial AGI ends up being. And I think that we found kind of two important pieces. One was simply a question of scale. Right, that all the results that we were getting that were impressive and really pushing things forward were requiring bigger and bigger computers. And we kind of realized that, okay, well, you're just going to need to raise billions of dollars to build these supercomputers. And we actually tried really hard to raise that money as a nonprofit. Like I remember sitting in a room during one of these fundraisers and looking in the eyes of a well-known Silicon Valley investor.
Who is that?
Well, I wouldn't share the name, but he was like, $100 million, which is what we're trying to raise. He's like, that's a staggering amount for a nonprofit.
Right.
And we looked at each other. We were like, it is, yeah. And we actually succeeded. We actually raised the money. But we realized that 10x that was not going to happen. I mean, if anyone in this audience knows how to do that as a nonprofit, like, please, we will hire you in an instant. But we realized that if we wanted to actually achieve the mission, that we needed a vehicle that could get us there. And we're not anti-capitalists. Like, that's not why we started a nonprofit the way OpenAI is a nonprofit. Actually, capitalism is a very good mechanism within the bounds that it's designed for. But if you do build sort of the most powerful technology ever in a single company, and that thing becomes just like way more valuable or powerful than any company we have today, capitalism not really designed for that. So we ended up sort of designing this custom bespoke structure. It's super weird. Like, we have this limited partnership with all custom docs. If you're a legal nerd, like, it's the kind of thing that is like actually really, really fun to dig into. But the way we design things is that we actually have the nonprofit is the governing body. So there's a board of a nonprofit that kind of owns everything. It owns this limited partnership that actually has profit interest, but they're capped. So there's only a fixed amount that investors and shareholders are able to get. And that there's a very careful balance in a lot of these details in terms of having the board have a majority of people who don't have profit interests, all these things, in order to really try to change the incentive and make it so that that the way that we operate the company comports with the mission. And so I think that this kind of approach of really trying to figure out how do you balance, how do you approach the mission, but how do you make it practical? How do you operationalize it? That is something that has come up again and again in our history.
And if we look back at the history of, artificial intelligence, this is nothing new, obviously. So what is it about now that feels like a watershed moment? Why now are all companies putting money into this? Why now is this the thing that we all are talking about? What is it about the technology now?
Yeah, well, I think the fundamental thing here is really about exponentials, right? It's like, no matter how many times you hear it, it is still hard to impossible to internalize. And when I look back, we've done these studies on the growth of compute power in the field, and we see this nice exponential with a doubling period of every 3.5 months, as opposed to 18 months for Moore's law. It's been going on for the past 10 years or so. But we actually extrapolated back even further, and you can see that this exponential continues all the way. Slightly smaller slope. It used to be Moore's law. But over the past 10 years, basically, people have been being like, well, you could go faster than Moore's law by just spending more money. And I think that what's been happening is we've been having this accumulated value, this slow roll, rather than trying to do a flash in the pan, like just get rich quick kind of thing that maybe other fields have been accused of. AI, I think, has been a much more steady incremental build of value. And I think that the thing that's so interesting is normally if you have a technology in search of a problem, adoption is hard. It's a new technology, everyone has to change their business, they don't know where it fits in. For AI, for language in particular, every business is already a language business. Right. Every flow is a language flow. And so if you can add a little bit of value, then everyone wants it. And I think that is the fundamental thing that really has driven the adoption and the excitement, is that it just fits into what everyone already wants to do.
Well, and also in 2017, a model called transformers, right? These large language models, and this idea that you could treat everything as a language, music and code and speech and image. The entire world almost looks like a sequence of tokens, right? If we could put a language behind it. That was really an accelerant for a lot of what you're building too.
Yeah, I think that it's, the way they think about the progress, like the technological driver behind this, is that it's very easy to latch onto any one piece of it, right? Transformer, definitely a really important thing, but where the transformer came from was really trying to figure out how do you get good compute utilization out of the compute hardware that we use, these GPUs, right? And the GPUs themselves are a really impressive feat of engineering that has required just huge amounts of investment to get there. And the software stack on top of them. And so it's kind of each of these pieces, and each one kind of has its time. Like one thing that's super interesting to me, looking from the inside, was that we were working on language models that looked very similar to what we do today, starting in 2016. We had one person, Alec Radford, who was really excited about language, and he just was kind of working on building these little chatbots, and we really liked Alec, and so we were just very supportive of him doing whatever he wanted. And meanwhile, we were off investing in serious projects and stuff, and we were just whatever Alec needs, we'll make sure he gets. And 2017, we had a first really interesting result, which was that we had a model that was trained on Amazon reviews, and that it was just predicting the next character, just what letter comes next. And it actually learned a state-of-the-art sentiment analysis classifier. You could give it a sentence and it would say this is positive or negative. May not sound very impressive, but this was the moment where we kind of knew it was going to work.
Wow. Right?
It's so clear that you would transcended just syntax, where the commas go, and you'd move to semantics.
Right.
And so we just knew we had to push and push and push.
It always comes to Amazon reviews. Who knew that this is the real story behind it?
Exactly. You always start small.